Lesson 2.7, Decimal Operations and Equations with Decimals. Let's refresh your memory about how to add and subtract decimals. When you add and subtract decimals, you want to line up the decimals. And remember that if you need to, let's say you're adding 5 plus 4.2, you use 0 as a placeholder. Find the sum. First of all, the rule for adding numbers with the same sign is you just add the absolute values of those two numbers. Both decimals are negative, so the sum is also going to be negative. So let's line up the numbers. And just add. Bring down the decimal. And remember, it's a negative answer. When you find the difference, you first need to rewrite it same, add, opposite. So let's change the subtraction to adding the opposite. Now you have different signs. In different signs we subtract the absolute values, and that's what this says here. Because 34 and 62 hundredths is a bigger number and it's a positive, the sign would be positive in your answer. So change that to adding the opposite. Now we line up the decimals, and because we are subtracting, I'm going to put the bigger number, which is 34 and 62 hundredths, on top, and 21 and 29 hundredths on the bottom, and subtract. Bring down the decimal, and remember it's positive 13 and 33 hundredths. Find the sum or the difference. Remember to line up the decimal. Pause the video at this time. Number 1, 2 and 8 tenths plus 5 and 9 tenths. Same sign, so we add. Bring down the decimal. Both signs are negative, so the answer is going to be negative. Change the subtraction to adding the opposite. Now they're the same sign, so I can just add. Line up the decimals. And they're both positive now, so the answer is also positive. Remember, when multiplying decimals, you do not need to line up the decimals. You just count the number of decimal places in each factor. This should be the number of decimal places in the product, which is your final answer. Same thing with dividing. You do not need to line up decimals. You just move the decimal place in the dividend, that's the number under the division sign, the same number you move the divisor, the number outside the division sign. For example 2, we are multiplying. I'm going to do my work at the bottom here. I am going to put the longer number, which has 3 numbers to it, on the top. Put my other number on the bottom, and just multiply. Add a placeholder, move to the 0. We don't need to do anything with 0, so actually we probably don't even need to do the placeholder. What you do need to look at is your decimal places. There is 1 decimal place here, 1 decimal place here. So when I add up the decimal places, my answer, or my product, should move 1, 2 decimal places. Now, different sign or the same sign? Because they're different, the product is going to be negative 5 48/100. For part B, we're doing the same multiplying, but remember 6 has 3 numbers to it, so that goes on top, and 2 5/10 goes on the bottom, and we just multiply. 5 times 5, 7 times 5, add the 2, 5 times 6, add the 3. Now add a placeholder and go to 2. 2 times 5, 10. Get rid of this 2, but put a 1. 7 times 2 is 14. Add the 1. 6 times 2 plus 1. And now we add them together. Count the decimal places, 2, 1. So the answer is going to have 2 plus 1 is 3. 1, 2, 3 from the end. And it's positive because of the same sign. 16 and 875 thousandths is your answer. Okay, part C. If you need to get another piece of paper because you ran out of room, please do so. Part C, this is going to be my dividend. The first number is my dividend. I'm actually going to ignore the signs right now. You can ignore the signs because you should already know if the answer is positive or negative. Two negatives, the answer is going to be a positive. So 23 and 49/100 divided by 2 and 9/10. We need to move the decimal place in our divisor one place until you hit the division sign. And then that means we move it one place inside the division sign as well. At this point, I like to rewrite my problem just so I see a better problem. And then we divide. Yes, you are going to have to divide the long way. So you're going to have to take a guess. I know that this is like 30, and this is maybe like 200, or maybe even like 24 right there. And this is 30. So do some estimating. Like if I put this as 230 into 240, I know that would go 8 times. So let's try 8. Okay, do some estimating to help. And then we multiply. 9 times 7. I'm sorry, 9 times 8, 72. 8 times 2 is 16. Plus 7 is 23. We subtract. We end up with 2. Bring down the 9. That's 1 because it's already 29. And when you get a remainder of 0, you're done. Remember, bring up the decimal point. So it is positive 8 and 1/10. Part D. 18 and 5/100 goes inside the division sign. It's your dividend. And then, I actually don't need the negative. I just put the negatives at the end. Move in one place, one place. Now I'm going to try to do this without rewriting it, but again, if you need to, because that makes it easier, please do. 19 does not go into 18, but I know that it's going to be, that was close, so it's going to be kind of high. So I'm going to try, let's bring up this decimal point so we don't forget about it. I'm going to try 9. I know 9 times 9 is 81. Carry the 1. And 9 times 1 plus 8 is 17. That means I'm left with 9 and a 5. 19 goes into 95. Let's see, 20. Let's like round. Let's do some rounding. So that's rounds up to 20. This can round up to 100. I know 2 goes into 10 5 times. So let's try 5. 5 times 9 is 45. Move that 8. 5 plus 4 is 9. By the way, if you want some more clarification on how I'm rounding this to figure out what these answers are, please come see me. I'll explain how you can quickly divide by doing some estimating. So, is it positive or negative? Well, they're different signs, so the answer is negative 9 and 5/10. You can also see that they say something here about checking the results by estimating, just to make sure it makes sense. Find the product or quotient for 3 and 4. Number 3, if you need help setting it up, remember you do not have to line up the decimals, they just happen to be lined up. Pause the video and solve the problem. Two negatives make a positive, 2 decimal places, so your answer is 16 and 52 hundredths. For number 4, I can help you set it up. Make sure you're doing it by yourself. First number goes inside, and then the last number is your divisor. Move the decimal, 1, 2. Move the decimal, 1, 2. At this point I like to rewrite it. You don't have to, but it makes it neater. Bring up the decimal. Different signs, so it is negative 2 and 5 hundredths. For example 3, we are going to solve the equation. You know this is adding 6 and 3/10, so I am going to add the opposite, which is negative 6 and 3/10, to both sides. Different signs mean I subtract. 6 and 3/10 is a bigger number, so let's subtract that way. You end up with 1 and 5/10. It's negative because 6 is bigger than the 4. For part B, let's change this first to adding a negative. So now what's the opposite of a negative? Adding a positive to both sides. Different sign, so I subtract. Please take a second and subtract. It's going to be positive because 5 is bigger. 2 and 23 hundredths is your answer. Please pause the video and solve problems 5, 6, and 7. For number 5, we add a negative 5 and 6/10. That means we're actually subtracting, and the answer is going to be positive 3 and 8/10. For number 6, here is my variable, so I'm going to add the opposite, negative 1 and 2/10. We just add, it's going to be negative 4 and 7/10. For 7, change subtraction to adding the opposite. And now, how do I get rid of that? By adding a positive. They're different signs, so I subtract. Please do this. Negative 1 and 9/10. For example 4, with solving multiplication and division, same thing you have been doing except with decimals. Divide by 8/10 to both sides. 48 divided by 8 is 6. You have decimal points, but because the decimal points are in the same spot, they actually cancel each other out. You're left with 6. N divided by 5, instead of dividing, we use the inverse, which is multiplying. Multiply by 5. Set it up. Take a second and multiply this. Pause the video if you need to. 2 decimal places, the answer is negative 10 and 75 hundredths. Pause the video and do 8 and 9. Number 8, we divide by 6 to get negative 2/10. 9, 26, and 4 hundredths.